Alright, well, first things first, we are going to need to make sure that all of our settings in the Photoshop app are ready for us to create a new face. You can see here in the image size guide that I use a 512 pixel canvas. The reason for this, for me anyway, is that WatchMaker uses a 512 pixel canvas, so I think it's easiest to just work in the resolution that the final product will be in. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Edit and Preferences, and what we're looking for specifically is the Guides, Grids, and Slices option. Now, I prefer to have a grid that is 64. They give you a main grid line every 64 with a subdivision of 8. I suppose it would be easier if we could see that grid so you understand what I'm talking about. So if you go to Window and then View, Show, Grid, and then also Show Guides. Now these guides will already be laid out, and the grid will also already be laid out. However, I cannot already have the template grid in place, just the guides. So what you'll need to do is go to your preferences and the guides, grids, and slices, and then make sure to adjust it to the appropriate numbers. The reason that I use the numbers I do is because I found it yields fairly good results, because almost everything you make will be divisible by 4. Not that that's that big a deal, but it's just that, in my opinion, looks nice on just about all screen sizes, I suppose. Another suggestion that I would have is you change in the file handling the automatically save recovery information from whatever it may be set to either 10 or 5 minutes. It depends upon how much you think your computer might screw up, I guess. Really, it's just to keep you safe. Okay, so with that being said, the first thing we're going to do now that we have this all set up and prepared is we are going to save it as in the location where you are going to keep it. I prefer to keep everything relatively organized, so I've created a WatchMaker tutorial folder where I will keep the various video segments, parts, and screenshots, as well as the base Photoshop file. So I'm going to name this watch the WMT-001 or 001. So now it is saved as a separate file, and your template will still be there to use again during your next creation. Alright, so we will turn off the info and get rid of the marks, and then we can leave these open. Here you see you've got opacity settings, so you can make everything just a little bit more see-through. We just need an idea that they're there when we're creating these pieces so we know what's going on. You can see here they're all marked. The round obviously just shows you what will be seen inside of any watch face that is round, and the flat tire shows you, obviously, for the Moto 360 users, you're going to need to make sure that any important aspects of the design for your face don't fall within this little flat tire area, or it won't be seen on theirs, which is why we're probably going to create a face that has a bezel that's removable. And then the safe area, this circle here, is going to be an area that can be seen by anybody, no matter the watch, square, round, flat tire. It really doesn't matter. It's the safe area. And then where we build our face will be right here in the watch face here area. Now, if you've never used Photoshop before, this might seem a little daunting because of the way I build these. Just keep in mind that there's 1,000 ways to use Photoshop. I just do things the way I do because it's what I'm comfortable with. That being said, the way I'm going to build this face, I'm going to use all shapes and paths. And to explain the difference there, I'll show you quickly. If I was to just draw randomly on the screen, like this here, that is now a non-editable line, basically. You know, it doesn't matter what I put here. If I wanted to make that line bigger or smaller, then you're going to see some pixelation occur. You see here, even when I click finish, you can still see some slight fuzziness and pixelization that happens. We are going to avoid that by working in only shapes and only paths. So I'll show you here, like let's say we create this circle, we can create it really, really small. Okay, and now let's say we want to make it larger, and I'll explain how to make things larger and do all that later on, but I want just trying to explain here. We can make this much, much larger, and it is still perfectly crisp and clean. So in the end, it really doesn't matter that we're only making a 512 pixel canvas, because since we'll build everything in a shape, if we ever need to enlarge the image, we'll be able to do so without losing any quality. So we'll just delete that here, and I guess let's get started. Okay, so now that we have our template all set up and prepared the way we're going to want it, what we're going to start with, at least what I've found easiest to start with, is the bezel. So we will create a new folder and name it bezel. Keeping things organized will just make it easier in the long run, trust me. And then we will create a new layer within the bezel folder to begin making the marks that will be around the outer edge of the screen. When we create these designs, at least for me, I make everything in white. The reason behind that is that the WatchMaker app will allow you to tint the color white whatever you want. So it takes a little more planning in the beginning. However, if you already have a fairly solid idea of what you're trying to achieve, working in all white will give you the maximum possibilities. That way you can really do whatever you want with these images once they're created. So the easiest way I found to make sure that regardless of what colors you have selected already, that you are always working in white, is just click this icon here and it will return you to your default black and white palette, and click the little arrow icon next to it, which will then swap the primary and secondary color. We are going to need to select the rectangular shape tool and then zoom in or not, depending upon if you feel comfortable. And then we're going to create a rectangle that fits in the bezel. You can make this whatever size you want. For the sake of making it fit perfectly, I'm going to go in about this size, and then you'll see our properties panel pops up and displays that we are actually using an 8 by 32 pixel rectangle, which when you zoom out looks about right. You turn your grids off to get an idea of about how large it is. And these are going to be the hour marks that we start with. Now I am going to create another one at the bottom and then merge the shapes. And the reason for that I will explain in a second. But to do that, what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the current rectangular layer, holding the Alt key on my keyboard, and then clicking and moving the layer. And what that does is it will automatically duplicate that layer for you. And then what we're going to do is we are going to use the Move tool to move our mark, or copied mark, down to the bottom of the face. And we will get them aligned just right. This is where the grid comes in really handy. And then what we will do next is we will select these two layers by selecting the first one, holding the Shift key, and then selecting the second. Now we will alternate click, and we have the Merge Shapes option. And you see now what that's done, it has made them both one shape. And I'll just name it Hour. Now the reason we merged the shapes is because it will make this next step loads easier, because it will put the rotation point right in the middle of the image rather than in the middle of just one mark. So we are going to hold the Alt key and duplicate this as well. And then what we will do is we will rotate it by 30 degrees, giving us our next set of hour marks. So we go to Edit, Transform, and Rotate. And you can see then that gives us the ability to rotate these wherever we want. For the sake of what we're doing, we want exactly 30 degrees. So we will use this area here and punch in 30 and then say done. And then we're going to repeat that action again, giving us, we'll repeat that action again as many times as it takes to get all of the hour marks that we're going to require. Now, once we have all of those in place, we are going to do the same thing we did before, and we are going to merge all of those together just to keep it a little organized and easier to work with. So we will select all of these by using the Shift key, clicking on the top or bottom one, and then select the top one, and then grab them all, and then alternate click and merge the shapes again. Now the name's going to change based upon which one you have at the top, so we'll just rename it again. So now we know that we have the hours of the bezel, and you can see here they all turn on and off easily. And because we've made shapes, we can change the color of them all very quickly and easily as well. However, as mentioned before, I like to keep everything just white when we're using them. We might throw colors in from time to time just to get an idea of what we're working with, but when we export the images, they're going to need to remain white. So now we have the hour marks, and what we will do next is we will create another new layer, and we will make the minute marks. Now, to make sure that they kind of fit in nicely with the hour marks, rather than turning the hour marks off, what I prefer to do is lower their opacity down to about 30, so we can still see them, so we make sure that they're going to match well with whatever we have planned next. And we'll zoom in here. We'll create another small mark. I'm going to go for about half of the size, but ending in the same area. And I'm going to go for half of the width as well. Now here's where this popping up helps quite a bit, because here it'll show you the properties of that shape, and I actually prefer them to be 4 for the minutes rather than 8. So I can type in 4, hit enter, and it will change it. However, you'll see here that it is not centered any longer. So we will need to move that shape right there. See, now it's perfect. And now again, we are going to hold the Alt key and duplicate that shape we just made, and then move that shape down to the bottom again. Just make sure you continue to zoom in to get a really good look at what is going on here. Make sure that everything is aligned properly. Now we will name this top one minute, select both of them, and merge the shapes again. Turn off that grid so you can see what's going to happen here. Now these we're going to need, because now we have them both on one, you can see here. Again, hold the Alt key and duplicate that layer, then take the duplicated image and rotate that by, now we rotate by 6 degrees to get to the minute. Make sure you get exactly 6 degrees each time. Okay? And now we just continue to do that until we have all of the marks that we're going to need for this design. For the sake of keeping things easy, we're just going to have it go all the way around this time. Okay, so now we have them all, and again we're going to need to merge all of these into a single shape just to keep things clean. So we will select the first one, hold the Shift key, and select all of the minute markers. Make sure you don't grab the hour marker by accident, and then merge the shapes. You see now you have them all in one easily editable shape. Okay, so now we can bring the opacity of the hour marks back up. And that's that. Now, if we want to, we could, let's see here, just in case we decide to make some type of rotating bezel, we normally want the very top design to be shaped something a little bit different so you know where the beginning was. And that's when we're going to begin using the pen tool. The advantage to this pen tool is that we can create a shape, basically any shape we want, and it'll still be completely editable the way that these ones here are. So we're going to create a new layer, and then make sure you have the pen tool selected. There, when you press and hold, you get all these different options. For now, we just want the very first basic pen tool, and we want to make sure that up here you can select shape, path, or pixels. You want to make sure that you're using a shape. You can start as a path and then turn it into a shape if you wish, but just make sure that in the end you have a shape. Now we are going to, let's see, we're going to make a triangle here. So I'm going to click this point here, and this point here, and then we're going to come down to this point, and then back up to this point. Now what that's done is that's created a triangle there. However, we're going to have this little bit of leftover from that mark, and I have a fairly quick and dirty way of getting rid of that mark so that it's gone. And the way we do that is we will create a layer mask on the hour and minute markers, and then use our brush tool to basically delete that area from our view. So what you have to do is you make sure that you're selecting this little white box. That's the actual layer mask area. Anytime you paint the layer mask black, it acts the same way that the eraser tool does without actually erasing anything. It's like a temporary erasement because you can adjust that whenever you want without destroying the original image underneath. So we'll remove the triangle just so that we have a full view, and then we'll use our brush tool and paint this layer mask here in black, just where we want it to disappear. So you see there, and now it's gone. And for all intents and purposes, it is deleted. But doing it this way makes sure that if we come back at a later date, let's say, oh, well, I do want that. You can easily disable the layer mask and it just comes right back. and then enable it again and it does go away. So again, this is just one of those little tricks that I use to make sure that I can always reference the same images that I've used and make quick edits without having to rebuild everything. So we will leave this, we'll name it try, just to keep it organized, and then we'll get a look at our full face. So now we have a completed bezel. It's nothing fancy, but it's going to get the job done. So we'll leave that there, and then we will move on to creating some of the inner parts of the face next. Okay, so now that we have the bezel created, we're going to start moving on to some parts of the main face. Again, we'll be creating a new folder or group, and I believe what we'll do next is we'll actually start, let's see, let's start with the hands, since they're going to be the most time-consuming process. So we'll create a group called hands, and then I prefer to actually have separate groups for each hand, and that's because the hands can get a little complicated with some of the designs that I do. You don't have to do this. You're more than welcome to do this however you want. Obviously, this is just a guide. However, it will be easiest to have a second hand group, a minute hand group, and an hour hand group. And then we will create a new layer in each group, just so that we're ready to start with. Okay, now the reason for the layers being in this order is because that is the appropriate order for how the watch is going to display them anyway. The bezel will obviously be underneath the hands, and the hour hand will be underneath the minute, and the second hand, and so on and so forth. So we'll try to keep all of these groups and layers organized exactly how they're going to be assembled in Photoshop. That way we really know that we're not going to screw things up. Although that's really bound to happen regardless of how you do this. But, so let's do that. We will get our grid turned back on. Won't worry about the guides at this point in time. So we do have our safe area already highlighted. For this, I wanted to create some fairly basic hands, just so that we get an idea of how things are built. So what I'm doing is I'm going to select the ellipse shape tool located down here, and to create the shape, I'm going to click directly in the middle. Now you'll see by default it automatically grows out from the center, but it grows out disproportionately. If you hold the shift key, what that's going to do is it's going to lock the height and width. So no matter what, you will end up with a perfect circle. And we'll go about right here, and then we will let go. And what that's done is that has created the center area of our hand. And next, we are going to be using the pen tool again to create the overall shape of the hour hand. We'll zoom in a bit here. Now you can obviously have the hour hand be shaped however you would like, but we're just going to create some fairly simple hands here. We are going to come out, I prefer to come out right about after that area that the ellipse tool was created in. And then we'll come down to, let's see what kind of angle we want here. We'll go about there. And then we'll just try to make sure that we match that shape on both directions. And there you have it. We have a fairly unfancy hour hand. And you can see here that what that's actually done is it's created two shapes, which is why we use groups. We have the ellipse, and we have the shape that we created with the pen tool. Now what I'm going to do is merge these shapes again because we already have them. We know that that's overall what the feel we want, and then we will merge the shapes. And now we will go on to create our minute hand. Again, I would lower the opacity of your hour hand so that you can still see it, but it won't really get in your way when you're designing your minute hand. We're going to need to create the center part with an ellipse tool again, holding the shift key to lock our width and height. I like to come in just one step below the hour hand so that there's going to be some depth there. And we will get into the layer styles that add the nice shadows and highlights, making everything look real as well later in this tutorial. So now we have our ellipse, and now we're going to use the pen tool to create the next part of our hand. I'm thinking about right here, and I still would like it to be the same exact width of the minute hand. And then we will come down. Again, trying to keep the symmetry going, although if you wanted to make some wacky hand, or even if you accidentally did, you could. And if that happens, then you can select the path selection tool here and click on the point that you wish to move, and it will allow you to change the shape. Just another reason we're using shapes and paths to do all this, because then we can come back and edit this however we want later. About there looks good. So again, we will merge these shapes. So now we have just one, and that is our minute hand. Again, we will lower the opacity, so now we can see both of those fairly well, and we will begin to make our second hand. Now the second hands are always slightly different on watches. So with this one here, I'm going to make something, let's see, I'll make something quite a bit different. We will start with the ellipse tool in the center again, except it's going to be nice and tiny. And then I am going to use a rectangle tool. And I'm going to start here. I want it to go all the way to the edge. Now, because they start from the center, that's going to cause a problem for me. So what I'm doing is I'm going to hold the Alt key, which allows it to no longer start from the center. And I'm going to have it extend beyond the hands to about there. And I only want it to be 4 pixels wide. So then we'll zoom in again to make sure that this is perfectly centered. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to add a second circle to the bottom right here. Want it to be right there. 10 pixels? No, I'd like an 8 by 8 pixel circle. And then we'll shift the position of that circle. There we go. And we'll turn the grids off. And what the heck, let's just make it as fancy as we can, right? Get that grid turned back on, and we will add a small triangle. Let's see. I'm going to use the path selection tool to bring this area down. That way I have room to add a triangular shape with the pen tool. Right like this. So we get a very exaggerated arrow for a second hand. So now, again, you see we've got all of these pieces here just for a second hand. So what we're going to do is use the Shift tool to select all of them and then merge them all. So now we have one layer that is just the second hand. Now if you really wanted to get an idea for how this would look, you could rotate them around the image to get a feel for it, but I'm pretty confident in the way these hands look here. And so now we have the basic shapes. What we're going to do is we're going to bring the opacity of each one back up to 100 and then turn off each one. And here is where the fun parts start. We are going to be using layer styles to allow us to really easily create a sense of realism that we can edit fairly quickly for all of our watch parts. Okay, so in this next step is when we are going to start learning how to use layer styles so that we can really add a sense of depth and realism to our faces without compromising the ability to be able to change the color. Again, this is just the way I do things, but I found it to be the most efficient. So I'm going to start by creating a new group that I will put actually below the bezel group. No. Yeah, I'll put this below the bezel group. Actually, you know what? I'll put it right in the bezel group. Nah, right below. Whatever, it doesn't matter where you put it as long as you understand what's going on. And we're going to call it shadows. Now, we want to create a circle that will be essentially the very outer portion of the watch. Again, holding the Shift key to keep it a perfect circle and getting right to the 100% mark. Now we have covered the entire face. And what we're going to do here, I'm going to turn off all the guides. So now we are left with just our parts of the face. We will name this the outer bezel, and we will turn off the guides and leave the grid on. Actually, you know what, we'll turn off both of those and turn these guides back on because we really want to see where this flat tire ends. At least I do, because this is how I usually make sure that I get this part done just right. Now with layer styles and using shapes and things of that nature, here's where things get really interesting. We're going to select this outer bezel layer and we're going to reduce not the opacity. Make sure that here you are only reducing the fill. The fill is basically the white area, or red, or whatever color your shape happens to be. It really makes no difference. But the fill is that solid part of the shape. So we're going to reduce the fill to nothing. So essentially now when we see the face, it's like that part doesn't even exist, which is perfect. Because what we want is just the layer styles, which are already built into the Photoshop program. We're going to access them by double-clicking, and then we get our layer style options box to keep it in the lower corner to where, so that I can still access my color palette if necessary. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bevel by checking the box here, and what you want to do is you want to click on the bevel and emboss area, and then you can see you get all these different options to adjust how this bevel that it just created appears. The first change we're going to make is I prefer both of these. Actually, you know what, we'll start at the top with the top options. We have an inner bevel, an outer bevel. You know, you've got multiple options. I highly suggest you watch a tutorial on how layer styles work. I'm not going to go too far into there, but what I do know is that we will need an inner bevel. We want it to be smooth, and we want it to go down, not up. You see how it's already changed the appearance overall of how that views. And now we can increase the size as well. You see how right away that instantly can make that bezel loads more realistic looking. I prefer to keep it around 32. Gives it a nice little smooth look. Now what you could actually do is you can change it from a smooth bezel to a chisel hard, and although it looks gnarly, then you can make sure to get right to the edge if you wanted. Let's go with 46. We'll leave it right at 46 there. But we're going to change it back to there's also a chisel soft. Looks even more gnarly. If you wanted if you prefer the look of a chisel hard, what you're going to need to do is soften that up by about 8 pixels. Then you still get that look of it going steep down. But for the look of this face, I'm going to keep it with a smooth bezel, or smooth bevel. You see? So then we've already got that nice little sense of realism right there. Now when we come down, you can actually adjust the angle from which the shadow is coming down. And what we'll do is we will adjust it to be right above the image. Let's see, so we've got 90 degrees, and let's leave this at 30. And the reason we're going to have it go from above is because in the WatchMaker app, we can actually attach this to a gyro effect area to where when you move your wrist, the shadow will adjust accordingly. We can also rotate it to be whatever we want. It's just easier to keep everything straight up and down from the beginning, because then the rotation codes that we use in the WatchMaker app once the images are imported they'll just be easier to work with. Okay? And then the next area that we're going to change is the highlight mode and shadow mode. We want to make sure that these are white and black. Okay? And what we'll do is change them both to normal and then adjust them accordingly. Like the black here, we probably don't need quite that dark. We can bring it down to 50. Bring the white down to 50. Actually, you know, I think what I'll do is I'll leave this at 75 and adjust the white to 50. The reason I'm going to leave it at 75 is because we can still adjust the opacity of this once it's in the WatchMaker app. However, we can't make it darker. And then we can add the contour option here, and it just slightly increases the overall look of that. And I'm going to adjust this to 75. It just brings that out a little bit more. That's the joys of using the layer styles, is we can really adjust this to be whatever we want it. I think right about here is good for that. So now that is our outer bezel shadow. Gives it it's already looking like it has more depth going on there. And in reality, we'll probably have it there, right above that, because you see the shadow would actually be sitting right above where those marks are. So again, just adding to the overall sense of realism. Now we are going to create another one. However, this time we want that shape to be right at the safe area point, right here. And now we will name this the inner shadow. Turn those guides off so we can really see what's going on here. And again, we want this fill to be brought all the way down to 0. And then double click to display our layer style properties. And we're going to add an inner shadow. You could add an outer shadow, but that's not really what we need, or a drop shadow. You see how that then makes this inside circle appear to be raised. We want it to appear sunken in just a little bit. Now, when you do this, you see how it automatically gives it the distance will adjust how far away the shadow is, and then the size will adjust, obviously, how far in the shadow comes. For this inner shadow here, really depending upon the look you're going for, you could do whatever you want. However, I would like a distance of 0, and then usually I do a size of 8, and bring the choke up to 25% overall. Right there gives us a nice little bit of realism to where it looks like the face is actually set into the watch without the need for using some type of gyro-based shadow, because that shadow is so small it wouldn't really change with the light source. I mean, you know, maybe a little, but not enough that we're going to have to add more code to deal with that. And that's really all we need for there. If you wanted to give it some other things, you know, you can always mess around with inner glows or even drop shadows with it. Like a nice little drop shadow of 0 and 0 seems like that would do nothing. However, if you see here, it just gives it a little tiny bit of extra. Maybe if there's any issues, it can help to hide them. I'm going to leave it turned off though. So now again, the joy of doing these with layer styles and 0% fill is watch what happens when we change the background color. I mean, see, making sure we work in all white and transparent makes it to where we can make any color watch we want once we're in the WatchMaker app. It just means we have to plan out a little bit more when we're using our graphics software first. So we will now have those bevels ready to go. And now we are essentially going to do the same thing with the hands. However, let's see. We'll name our hands CLR. That way we have our base hand color, and we'll start with the hour hand. Now what we're going to do is, again, you're holding the Alt key and selecting and then moving the layer, and it will create a duplicate. So now with the second hand, we will name it Overlay, or just O. I mean, you know, you can really name it whatever you want. I just try to keep it organized for later. And we will reduce that fill down to 0. And again, we will go into our layer styles. This time we are going to add a nice bevel. Except I don't want it to be smooth. I would like a hard bezel on this. So chisel hard. And we are going to bring it up until they meet. Right there. We'll go with 56. And then again, changing our colors to normal. Maybe, let's see, soften that up by a few pixels. There we go. It gives us nice and smooth, but it still gives those nice hard crisp lines here as well. And then let's see, I'm going to turn off the global lighting and see how that looks. These shadows are going to be difficult to make move once in the app, so you really want this hand to look appropriate, or you at least want this layer style to look the way you're going to want your hand to appear. I think right there will give us a nice look. Maybe you know what, let's just stick with using the global light for now. The contour, there we go, that adds considerably more. Okay, and then we can add a slight drop shadow, again with a distance of 0, and I really want this to be super slight, and that's just enough to create a shadow that's always there, because we're going to create a third layer to the hand, which is the shadow that actually moves. This is just enough to keep the outer edge looking nice. We'll leave it at 2. So now, again, this is just an overlay, which is transparent. Again, the joy there being once this white color portion of the hand is in the app, then you can change the color to whatever you want, and all of this will still look nice and give the appearance of depth. So then we are going to repeat that process on the minute and second hand. However, there is a trick here. We will turn the minute hand on, turn the hour hand group off, and make sure we duplicate the color, change it to O again, and then we are going to alternate click on the hand that we just did and copy the layer style, and then select the hand that we want to duplicate that effect on and paste the layer style. Now what we've done is basically we've just made sure that it looks exactly the way we want. So now our hour hand is already done and looks pretty darn good. And then again, we will need to do that with the second hand. However, pasting the layer style might not work here because this hand does look considerably different with its shape. Although that doesn't look half bad, so I think we'll just leave it like that. So now we have all of our hands done. They're nothing fancy, but they'll get the job done. Now, for this build, I'm actually not going to use any number, or not going to create any numbers or marks on the inner part of the face with the Photoshop app. And that's because I want to explore how to do that within the WatchMaker app itself. So for the most part, we are done with this face here. Okay, so the next shape that I'm going to create, which will be the last shape we make before saving all of these parts and pieces, is going to be the one that might seem a little confusing at first. Basically, what I need is a shape that will cut out all parts of the face except for this inner circle here. Now to do that, what I want to do is create a square that is 512 by 512 pixels. Okay, we want that, again, we want everything to be white. And we will move that all the way to the top just to make dang sure we're getting it right. And we want just the inner circle of that shadow to be visible. Basically anything that's inside of that circle to be visible. So I am holding the control key and selecting that inner shadow area. And then I will click on the layer mask tool, and what it's done is it actually created a reverse of what we need. So I am holding control and hitting the I key, which then will swap those two. Now what this does is it automatically blocks out all parts of the face. The reason for this will actually make sense once we get into Photoshop, or once we get into the WatchMaker app. But basically, the reason is we want to be able to throw in some of the transparent patterns, which I have included in a downloadable pack on watchaware.com, like the carbon fiber here, that I believe the one I included is at a 50%. Looks like that. But we only want it to be within this inner circle, and the pack that I provided is the full square. So what this shape here does is it will mask all parts of that off so that we can get just the desired area. So we will just name this layer cutout. Okay, so now comes the fun part. Let's turn off all of our grids and slices, view it at 100%, and begin to save this watch piece by piece. We will, let's see, how will we do this? Turn off all the hands, turn off our shadows, and turn off our background, which is one of the most important parts that you need to make sure you do not have on. That way we have what is considered a fully transparent background. Now, we will, actually, you know what? We'll leave the background on, turn the bezel off, and make the background white. You can also do just a basic square in WatchMaker. However, we're doing this just for the sake of doing it. Now, there are many ways to save or export images in Photoshop. I have found the easiest way to export a PNG file is holding the Control, Alt, Shift key all at the same time and then pressing X. So Control, Alt, Shift, S. And what that does is it brings up the Save for Web dialog. And then here you can select different presets of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And what we need, or this preset here is actually the easiest. We want a PNG 24 with transparency turned on. You know, you've got plenty of things here that you can change, but as long as your matte is left here, is left blank, and your transparency is turned on, and you are a PNG 24, then you can click the Save button. And again, this is why we created the WatchMaker tutorial series area with a parts list. Now, make sure that you are naming everything something that makes sense, because it's going to need everything everything is going to need to stay in fairly good order. So this will obviously be called background. And if you want to get fancy, you can do background CLR 1, because I know that that is the color 1 that we're going to be using. Now we will turn this off and turn the bezel marks on. Again, Control Shift S. And now you see we have a fully transparent background. It does look a little pixelated here. Oh, that's because I'm on the optimize button. We need the original. Make sure that we are PNG 24. Okay, and now save. Again, this is the bezel marks. The reason we make sure to include bezel is because we will include that on anything that is the bezel. So we will have our shadows turned on, which here they're hard to see, so if you need to turn the background on just for a minute to make sure you've got the right bezel turned on. We want just this outer bezel piece, not the inner one. And then we will save that. Whoop, why does it look like that? Stop giving me there. I want the original area. There we go. Now we are, again, bezel underscore shadow. And then this here is our inner shadow. Again, hard to see, but as long as you know what you're doing, you should be good to go. We are saving this as the face inner shadow. Now the hands are where things will get slightly complicated. They're not complicated, it's just there's going to be multiple parts, so you need to make sure you're saving them properly. We'll start with just the hour hand. We do not want the overlay and CLR layers turned on at the same time. We want them to be in separate layers. So first we're going to save the color. So we will save this as hand hour color. Now turn the color off, turn the overlay on, and save it again as hand hour or overlay, whatever you'd like to do. Now the reason for that is when we view our parts, it's going to keep the hour parts right next to each other. So you just need to be careful with your file names. Now we move on to doing the same thing for all the other hands. So we've got hand, minute, color. And hand, minute, overlay. and second color and second overlay. Now when we come and view our folder, you see here we've got all of our hands together and seconds are next to each other, hours are next to each other, and minutes are next to each other. I mean, this is just good practice to make sure when you're saving these images that you name them something that keeps them organized from the very beginning so that you don't have hell to go through when you're trying to find the proper image, especially with the way sometimes the image galleries on Android can make it very difficult to see the entire image. And you'll see what I mean when you try to assemble these later. Now we also need to have the cutout layer. Make sure that that's all you have. And we will save that as cutout. Now we are done, at least with the Photoshop part. And I realize that it really doesn't look like we've done much. However, please bear with me, because once we get into the WatchMaker app, you will be surprised at just how real we can make this face look, with all of these different layers turned on and tinted properly to allow for a very nice looking face. And what we'll do here is, again, make sure to save it so you have your file to come back to later. And that concludes the Photoshop part of this build.